What is going on, my noobets, and welcome back to the Noob Network. It has been a little bit since I last put out a build guide video, as the last few dungeons have been super grindy to get gear, but I think I finally have a build together. And like I mentioned in any of my prior build guides before, this is not end-all be-all build. This is a build that I like to run. This is a build that I use. This is a build that does work. If you have a build that's different from mine, please let me know in the comments below what's different, and let's get right into it. All right, so like I mentioned in the intro, this is just a build that I like to run, and it is successful, and it is proven to work for me. Now, I'm doing my build guides just slightly different than I usually do them. This is trial, the advanced form of it. The gear that you get from there, that is the gear that I'm going to showcase in this build guide, which I've been using in the master. So that's how it's going to work. It'll be the advanced gear that I use in the master, and then my next build guide video will be the master gear, which I will use for the next dungeon that will come out with next mod. All right, to get things started, let's talk about the race. I am a wood elf. I've been a wood elf for a while now. Most of my characters are actually wood elves. I mainly run the wood elf to get the +2 to dex and intelligence. That's a bonus there. And for a warlock, having that intelligence, which goes to our magical damage boost, is a plus and is a must. And then having that +2 to dexterity, not so much as a big thing nowadays, since there's a lot of places that you can get crit sev. And then we also get the elven accuracy, which is the +5 to crit strike. Now, I will say, being a warlock, finding crit strike is crazy easy. So with this build, or whatever you may be building, you may find it harder to try to balance that crit strike. There's probably a possibility to go with things like even a human if you wanted to, or a dragonborn, to get the power in there as well if you needed that. I mean, the game also gives a crap ton of power too. But this is the race that I'm going with. I am a wood elf warlock, and again, that is mainly for the +2 to dex and the +2 intelligence. There are other races out there that give that exact same bonuses, but this is the one I'm using. All right, now looking at our ability score, like I said, I'm going all in on dex and int. Dex giving us the crit sev and movement speed, and then that intelligence, like I mentioned earlier, mainly for that magical damage boost, not so much for that control bonus. I don't even know, out of all the changes that they've made in this game, they still have control bonus, and control bonus is useless. However, like I said, all in on dex, all in on int for our ability points. So taking a peek at our build stats, just standing here unbuffed, we are sitting at 124,000 item level, 1.3, almost 1.4 million hit points with 15,000 damage. We're sitting at 86% power, 53% accuracy, 72% combat advantage, 74% crit strike, and 101% for crit sev. Our defense and awareness are sitting at 32% apiece. I know you've heard me mentioned already now a couple of times our magical damage boost. In case you don't know, it is a stat under your boost. For our warlocks, it's very important, but it's not just warlocks. Your wizards can utilize it. Your rangers can utilize it depending on how you build it. Your bards can utilize it depending on how you build it. But you're either going to be a magical damage or you're going to be physical damage. And depending on which one you are, it's going to depend on whether you're going to build into magical damage boost or physical damage boost. There's not a huge source of it in the game, but it is in the game. And when you get a chance to see it, or when you get a chance to get it, definitely recommend tapping into it because it does give you a little bit more damage. All right, before we get to looking at our gear and our companions and our enhancements and the mounts and whatnot, let's look at the things that we use to actually buff the build. So we're using a flask of potency for the 550 crit strike, 550 accuracy, 550 power, and most importantly, the 5% crit sev. Squash soup again for the 5% crit strike and the 5% crit sev. Prime rib for the 20,000 maximum hit points and the additional 4,000 power. And the Sun Lord's elixir for the 2,000 accuracy and the 5% combat advantage. Now, you guys can swap these things around depending on what your build needs. Instead of using the Sun Lords, you could go the Wildstorm, or instead of the Prime Rib, you could go like the Ratatouille for the accuracy. Squash soup, you could do things like hot wings, which I've used for crit sev and accuracy. And as far as flask of potency, I really don't know what you'd switch that out for, but you'd have other potions like power, accuracy, defense, whatnot. But those are the 4 things that we are using to buff the build, as well as I'm using the spider totem. You could use the reforgers box if you need like power, which is 3% there. But these are the 4 things plus the totem or the box that I'm using to actually buff the build. All right, so let's start looking at the build here. So for our helm, we're running the Enchanted Depth Weave Cap, giving us 2400 crit strike, 2400 forte, and 2880 combined rating, as well as the equip bonus. For every 5 seconds you're in combat, you gain 1% combat advantage for a max stack of 10. I have yet to get the M-Sod helmet, and I know it's a drop. It's 3% less combat advantage, but it goes off of your health. So at full health, I'll always have 7%. If I take hits, I lose at 7%. But I personally think, even though yes, it takes a little bit of time to proc fully, it's not health based. And I know in the new trial, there's a few areas where you're taking dot damage or you're taking unavoidable damage, where you will lose that combat advantage. I personally like this helmet over the M-Sod helmet. I have it on a couple of my other tunes, but not my Warlock here. But I prefer this helmet. Let me know in the comments, do you prefer the helmet that gives you the 10% with the time, or do you prefer the M-Sod helmet, which gives you 7%, but it's up most of the time unless there's somewhere where you're taking dot damage. Chest, I'm running the Enchanted Depth Weave coat, giving us 1200 accuracy, 2400 combat advantage, 1200 forte, and 2880 combined rating, with the equip bonus of Ruthless Advantage. When you damage or heal your target for more than 10% of your maximum hit points in a single blow, you gain 1.5% accuracy and combat advantage for 15 seconds, max stack 5. So that's going to give us a total of 7.5% accuracy and combat advantage. Again, I do know there's an M-Sod piece that gives other stats. For my builds, and particularly my Warlock, I find it combat advantage is one of the harder things to find. So this is why, again, I rock the helmet that gives me the 10%. I'm rocking the chest piece that's giving me 7.5%. And then you'll see in my pants another 10% there as well. So again, if your build differs, let me know how so. The arms, I'm rocking the first of 2 M-Sod, the Gauntlets of the Wrathborn, giving us 3993 accuracy, 3686 crit sev, and 4095 combined rating, with the equipped bonus of Enveloped Rage. In combat with one enemy, your accuracy is increased by 1.6% every 2 seconds. Every 2 seconds you're in combat with 2 or more enemies, and you lose 1 stack. So that would be with one enemy, you get 8% accuracy, and then the arms gives us also 4% combat advantage. Like I said, I'm hunting combat advantage on this build, so I'm getting it from a lot of pieces of gear. The accuracy is a bonus. A lot of times with these newer dungeons and trials, you're rarely ever with like just the boss, but when you are, the 8% accuracy is nice to have. For our main hand and offhand, we're running the Omen of Doom, which this is coming from the new zone. This is that mythic right now. Once I collect enough of the dust in the master, then this will then go to celestial. But for the main hand, we're getting 100 damage, 3120 accuracy, 2880 crit strike, 2880 crit sev, and 4320 combined rating. Modification is garbage right now. I've yet to change my main hand or my offhand's modifications around, but once I make these celestial, they will be switched around. And for the Warlock, in case you don't know, obviously the Unleash gives us 4.5 base damage boost at Mythic for DPS and 4.5% outgoing healing for the heal side. But we also get 7.5% crit sev and 2.5% power from the mythic version of the weapon. And for the offhand, we're getting 3120 accuracy, 2880 critical strike, 2880 crit sev, and 4320 combined rating. For our boots, the second piece of the M-Sod that I'm wearing, Greaves of the Crimson March, giving us 2457 combat advantage, 4505 crit sev, and 4095 combined rating, with the equipped bonus of Bloodletting. Whenever you critically strike with your powers, you have a 10% chance to reduce your maximum hit points by 20 and gain 9% damage for 10 seconds. Now, as a DPS, this is pretty good. Like, we get more damage, and you shouldn't be taking big hits. So that 20% maximum hit point reduction shouldn't factor in too much. I have noticed wearing these boots in MSOD though, when the group is supposed to hypo together, sometimes I may take a death, and I believe this to be the culprit. I've lost that 20% maximum hit points during that hypo phase, and I think the few times I die come from that. For the neck, I'm wearing a Scintillant Amulet. This is pretty much a go-to right now for just about any magic build. There's a Shroomwood for you physical users out there, so if you're a physical user, don't go for the Scintillant set, go for the Shroomwood set. It does exactly what the Scintillant set does, but it buffs your physical damage and not your magical damage. The Scintillant set gives us +6 to int, which is, again, like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, int goes to our magical damage boost, so we definitely want that. 849 combat advantage, 852 crit strike, 849 crit sev, and 1530 combined rating, as well as the neck and the waist, which is a complete set. You only need 2 of the pieces. When you have them both, whenever you use an encounter power, you gain a stack, granting you 2.5% accuracy and 5% recharge for 5 seconds, stacking up 3 times, meaning we get 7.5% accuracy and 15% recharge. So that's good there for, again, buffing that dump stat that a lot of people say, accuracy, and then also that recharge. Warlocks don't really need help in the recharge department, but any little bit does help. So for our first ring coming out of the new trial, the advanced version of it is the Rot Steel Ring of Spore, giving us 5580 combat advantage, 8370 crit sev, 1.5% action point gain, and 3720 combined rating with the equipped bonus of Combatant's Impact. For every 5 seconds you are in combat, you gain 0.7% crit strike with a max amount of 9.1% at 13 stacks. Now, these rings, let me know if you guys noticed this, but I believe this ring, if it refreshes, I've seen my crit strike get the full 9.1%, and then it drops off for like just a second or so, and it builds back up. So it doesn't seem to me like the helmet, once you build it up, it stays there until you die. This ring seems to be missing some tooltip information, where it seems like it may have, like, once you have max stacks, you have it for like 10 seconds. And then maybe there's like an 11-second cooldown, which is like the 1 second, and then it builds back up. That's just what I've noticed. Let me know if you guys have noticed that. For our second ring for the new zone is the Rot Steel Coil of Blight, giving us 5580 combat advantage, 8370 crit strike, 1.5% action point gain, and 3720 combined rating. With the equipped bonus Survivor's Tendency, your current hit point increases your crit sev up to a maximum of 7.5%. I personally don't like equip bonuses that do this, that go based off your health. Because again, yes, as a DPS, you shouldn't be taking damage. But again, there's certain things or certain times where it's unavoidable. Like the hypos in MSOD, it's unavoidable damage. So you lose some crit sev there. Or during the maze in the new trial, you take some dot damage there. Or somebody steps on a poison trap and you don't, but you're still taking the damage from the poison. So you lose crit strike there. That doesn't matter too much because obviously you're not doing damage there, but still, I'm losing stats for no reason in my personal opinion. So I don't really like this, but it is currently one of the better rings. And like I mentioned, the neck and the waist Scintillant set. The Scintillant is giving us another +3 to int, which we care about a lot. The +3 to charisma, which we don't care too much about. 849 accuracy, 849 combat advantage, 852 crit strike, and 1530 combined rating. For our shirt coming from MSOD is we're wearing the Blood Woven Signs, giving us 2457 accuracy, 992 defense, 1276 forte, 1.5% recharge speed, with the equipped bonus of critical empowerment. Whenever you critically strike with your powers, you have a 10% chance to gain 3.5% damage for 10 seconds, and this effect is doubled in the Fae. As well as with the shirt and the pants, we also get another 2.5% combat advantage. And then for the pants, we have the blood woven sigils, giving us 1134 combat advantage, 2268 critical strike, 992 defense, 1.5% action point gain, a 2835 combined rating with the equipped bonus of reckless advantage. Whenever you deal damage to an enemy, gain a stack of reckless advantage, increasing your combat advantage by 2%, but decreasing your critical avoidance by 1.5% for 5 seconds with a max stack of 5. So the pants alone is giving us 10%. So with the helmet giving us 10, the pants giving us 10, that's 20, and the shirt giving us 7.5, we're getting 27.5% just from gear alone in combat advantage. So that helps out massively for the combat advantage hunting that I'm doing. Now for my main artifact, this one changes a lot. So if you don't have this particular one, do not worry about it. This is the one that I change depending on what the group needs. Usually my bottom 3 stay the same. For the main artifact, I have the Beacon of Meteor Swarm, giving 1125 critical sev, 1125 crit strike, 1125 combat advantage, and 1275 combined rating. For our second artifact is going to be the Assassin Knife, giving 1800 crit sev, 1950 accuracy, 1700 combat advantage, and 2000 combined rating. For the third artifact, Night Flame Sensor, giving us 2184 power, 3510 forte, 2496 combat advantage, and 2080 combined rating. And lastly is the Armor Aegon, giving us 2340 crit sev, 2535 accuracy, 1560 combat advantage, and 2080 combined rating. Okay, for our enchantments, the first one we have is a Celestial Emolite, giving us 1880 power, 1880 combat advantage, and 1880 crit strike. Then we're running the Garnet Celestial, 2700 power, Celestial Moonstone, 1485 power, 1485 combat advantage, and the Celestial Opal, giving us 1485 power, 1485 crit strike. In our utility slot, we're running the Garnet for the 2700 forte, and then for our defense, we're running 4 Celestial Garnets, giving us 2700 defense. For our overloads, we're running the Rage of Flames. This is pretty much a no-brainer, 5% bonus damage, and the Devil's Precision, giving us +5 crit strike, +5 accuracy. In the combat enhancement slot, we're running the Celestial Swift Synergy, one of the newer ones. Your attacks grant you a stack of preparation for 10 seconds. Each stack increases your combat advantage and crit sev by 0.9%. All stacks are lost when you leave combat. Again, hunting down that combat advantage here. Maximum preparation stacks is 6. When in a party, it evolves into Swift Synergy, allowing up to 12 stacks. And then it also gives you the equip bonus of increased damage by 12%. So at 6 stacks, 5.4% combat advantage and crit sev. While in a party, it'll give you 10.8 combat advantage and crit sev. And then for our bonus enchantment, we're running the Celestial Action bonus, just giving us 6% action point gain. In the trial, I actually run the movement speed for the maze phase of it and the bridge phase, so you can flip back and forth there. Again, if you don't have any of these enchantments, use what you have. I'm sure there's plenty of ways to make this build work when it comes to enchantments. Enchantments is like the #1 spot that I go to when I have to make stats meet. So whatever you have, I'm sure you have something that will work. For our campaign and guild boons, I'm just going to flip through these real quick. You can pause the video and check them out. But these are what I'm running for my campaign boons. For my offensive and my guild boons, I have power. For my defense, I have defense. And then for my utility, I have movement speed. Again, I'm using movement speed for the new trial, for the maze and the bridge. But you could also use revive sickness if you need to. Or if you're like farming, you can go with mount speed. But currently, this is what I'm using. For my summon campaign, I currently have Etrian. That's the last group I was in. That's what they wanted me to run. Allies who are above 50% health have their power and crit strike increased by 2%. And allies who are below 50% health have their defense and crit avoidance increased by 2%. Not a whole lot there, but every little bit helps. In my offensive slot, I have the Raptor's Instinct. It's a no-brainer, giving us more power. In my defensive slot, I have Mince, giving me 6.8 to 9.8 more damage depending on how strong the enemies I'm fighting. My first universal slot, I'm running the Neverwinter's Night, giving me a flat 9% more outgoing damage. And in a second universal slot, I'm using Patiri, which is giving me 14% more damage versus bosses. And lastly, in the universal slot, I'm using the Golden Cat for 9% combat advantage. On to our mount combat power. I've been testing the Grub Shank and I've actually been liking it so far. So when you summon him, it does an initial hit of 1800 magnitude, and then it applies a dot damage over time, doing a total of 1725 over 5 seconds. I think it does pretty well. It works really well with the Warlock as well. It does do necrotic damage. It does benefit from being used on a magical character versus a physical character. But if you don't have this or don't want to use this, you could definitely opt into using the Toad, which is what you should be using. If you are a magical user, again, the Toad does benefit the magical users more. And for our equip bonus, I'm using Providence. When you or a party member are struck by a foe, there is a chance that they will be healed for 6% of their maximum hit points, and you will gain a stack of Radiant Weapon. This effect may only occur once every 10 seconds. Radiant Weapon grants you 2% additional damage as radiant damage for 12 seconds. You may have no more than 8 stacks of Radiant Weapon from any source. This is really good right now in Trials, since there's 10 people there, including yourself. So any one of those allies that take damage has a chance to proc this once every 10 seconds. And if anybody's using the Golden Lion can also give you a stack. But I know there's a debate right now, or it's not right now, it's actually been a debate for a while, on which one is better between Providence or Ferocity. And I personally don't know. So if you know which one's better between the two, let me know so I can adjust my build. For our stable, you can check it out here. I actually have plans to rearrange my stable probably in the next build video. So if you don't agree with this, do not fry me in the comment section. I am aware I do have plans to change it, rearrange it, but these do currently work. Like I said, they are working on this build currently, so they do work. I do have a Mender's Covenant, Executioner's Covenant, another Executioner's Covenant, a Cavalry's Haste, and a Tactician's Precision. You can pause the video here to see how those insignias line up. But for my collars, I'm using a Sturdy Crescent, giving me 5% more encounter power damage. A Unified Crescent, giving me 5% more movement speed. A Supportive Regal, which is just, this one is here because my Warlock is also my healer. So this is why it's here. Again, don't kill me. I believe it's in like most of my build guide videos for my Warlock. So instead of me flipping back and forth for this collar, I just leave this one here. To me personally, it doesn't make a big difference. And then for my next collar, I have the Practical Regal. Again, just giving me 10% more Astral Diamonds. And then the Wayfaring Bard, giving me 5% more crit set. And on to the section probably most of you all have been wanting to see is my power section. Now, if you main a Warlock, you're probably already looking at this like this is probably trash. But again, I've been playing around with this. I've been doing some weird testing, some theory crafting, and I found that this particular setup to actually work pretty well for me. So as my main at will, I'm using a Dark Helix, which has a 135 plus 50 per Dark Spiral magnitude, as well as when you cast it and you animation cancel it, you get 2 Soul Sparks. And then I have as my secondary Hellish Rebuke, give me 1 Soul Spark. And I'm mainly using this as the dots, and each of those dots grant you 1 Soul Spark as well. Now for our first encounter, I've come to love Vampiric Embrace. Not only does it do pretty decent damage and it has a pretty good cooldown, but it also heals you. And again, in a lot of these trials recently, there's some dot damage in there. Like in MSOD Phase 7, there's that dot damage. It actually will keep you alive quite a bit. And in the Soul Harvest trial, when your tank and healers are going through the maze and it's just a DPS fighting ads, this works wonders. So I've come to really love Vampiric Embrace. And then I'm using Fiery Bolt, which again probably doesn't make sense to a whole lot of people since they've done rework on the Warlock, but I like Fiery Bolt. One, because like I mentioned earlier in the video, there's not too many situations where it's one-on-one anymore, but you'll see the synergy that I'm trying to create a little later on when I get through my feat. It works pretty well. And then obviously Killing Flames is a staple with the Warlock. It's a no-brainer. If you're not using Killing Flames and you're not using an AoE build, then you're playing your Warlock wrong, which you're probably saying by the way my setup looks already. Killing Flame does 650 to 975 depending on how much damage or how much health is missing from the enemy. Now for the dailies, I have Tyrannical Curse and Flames of Phlogathus. I'm still playing around with this one. I go back and forth between using this and having this Soul Siphon. Soul Siphon is really good in AoE situations. This is supposed to be really good damage. I don't know. I'm old school and I like Tyrannical Curse, so I tend to use Tyrannical Curse mainly. But I do every once in a while dabble in using Flames of Phlogathus. For my class feats, I'm using Dark Prayers, which anytime the Soul Puppet attacks, it gains a Soul Spark, which goes really good with the second at will, which every dot gives a Soul Spark. And then obviously All-Consuming Curse applies Curse with your at wills. Now, the reason why I'm using Dark Prayers Curse and Hellish Rebuke for the dot is because I'll show you towards the end of my feats. I'm using Double Scorch, which is just going to increase the damage of your soul. Oh, it's going to increase the damage of your Soul Scorch by 25 magnitude. Warlock's Curse obviously should be a no-brainer. Increases your damage to cursed targets by 15%. Soul Desecration. I know a lot of people don't like to use Soul Desecration. They prefer to use Rescue Investment. I like Soul Desecration, and through testing, the Soul Puppet now actually does like really good damage, anywhere in the ballpark of like 300 to like 500,000 damage. So I like my Soul Puppet being up at all times. It's like having a second companion. Executioner's Gift. I used to be a hardcore advocate for Creeping Death, but I found out now that it really just, Creeper Death can't keep up with Executioner's Gift. Maybe at the very beginning, but once you get to about 50% health taken off of like whatever you're fighting, Executioner Gift just takes over, completely takes over. And then for the bread and butter of why my build is set up the way it's set up, the reason why I'm using the dot for Hellish Rebuke and the reason why I'm using Dark Prayers is because I am not using Soul Spark Recovery, which most Warlocks do. They use Soul Spark's Recovery to get their cooldowns back so they can encounter spam. I'm not. I'm using Wrathful Souls, where Soul Spark now increases your damage by 1%. And if you ever read your Soul Sparks, you can have up to 30 Soul Sparks. So if you have all 30 Soul Sparks, that's another 30% damage on top of the 15 that you're getting here, on top of whatever other buffs are floating around in combat. I feel like that's huge. And when you use your Soul Scorch with having Wrathful Sword and the Double Scorch, like your Soul Scorch almost does like 2 million damage. So that's my current setup. That's the setup that I've been using for a while now, and it works, and I think it's a fun playstyle. You guys give it a try. Let me know if it works enough for you. If it completely sucks, let me know in the comments as well on why it sucks. This is my current loadout. And for my AoE setup, I have Eldritch Blast being my main at will, which is the third hit is an AoE attack. And then the Dark Helix, which is my secondary attack. When you kill enemies, you get a Dark Spiral, which does pretty good damage. My main daily is going to be Soul Siphon, with Tyrannical Curse being my secondary one. And then for my feat, I use Dark One's Blessing, just because every 10 seconds when you kill somebody, you get 6 Soul Sparks, which then goes back into having this up 100%. And then Dust to Dust. And I didn't even mention my encounters. I'm using Hellfire Ring, Fiery Bolt, and Curse Bite, old school Warlock AoE setup. And you already know my feats are, because they did not change from my single target loadout. All right, and that is my Warlock DPS build. That's my AoE and my single target loadout. I won't show my rotation, just due to the fact of pretty much all of my other Warlock videos have my rotation on how I go about, you know, when do I cast what and how do I cast it. If you want to see that, definitely check out any of my older videos. I mean, the only difference really between them is gear per se, but the rotation is roughly still the same. I know I'm using different powers here, but for here, I'm just casting as things come off a cooldown because they pretty much are almost up all the time. Cast all your powers, you'll pop 2 Soul Scorches and then cast your powers again. It's a really simple rotation. But again, like I said, that is my build. It is probably different than most Warlock builds out there. If you main a Warlock, it's probably completely different than what you play. If you decide to give this a try, let me know what you think about it. Is it good? Is it bad? I like it. I enjoy it. I tend to do pretty good damage with it, and I'm having fun with it. So until something else changes in the game, or until the Warlock fundamentally changes, I think this is how I'm going to be playing, and I recommend you guys to give it a shot. Let me know what you think. If you missed the last episode in this series, you can catch up right here in the top left. Check out the playlist in the bottom left for all the videos in this series. My latest adventure is in the top right. I had a lot of fun recording it, and I think you might like it too. And YouTube has handpicked a video for you in the bottom right. I'm curious to know what it is, so check it out and let me know if they chose wisely. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Thank you for tuning in to the Noob Network. I'm Noob Hard, and I'll see you in the next one.